In 1975, over 2 million people worldwide sold their homes, quit their jobs, and prepared for the end. That never came. Today, you'll discover why one of the world's most well-known religious organizations manages to keep millions of faithful followers even after failed prophecies, overnight doctrinal changes, and biblical truths deliberately hidden for over 150 years. What you're about to hear may forever change how you view not only Jehovah's Witnesses, but the Bible itself. Prepare yourself, because some truths are more disturbing than you imagine. Marcos was 34 when his life crumbled, not from tragedy, illness, or financial loss. His life collapsed the exact moment he opened his Bible and read John 1:1 in the original language. An elder for 7 years in New York congregation, Marcos was respected, admired, an example to the youth. Married to Sarah, a regular pioneer for 15 years, father of 2 children raised in the truth, as they call it. His routine was impeccable. Meetings on Tuesdays and Sundays, preaching on Saturdays, family study on Thursdays. A life entirely dedicated to the organization he believed was God's only channel on earth. But that September morning, while preparing a talk about Christ's divinity, something happened. Marcos decided to check the original Greek text of John 1:1. What he discovered in those ancient characters made his stomach turn. The New World Translation, the official Bible of Jehovah's Witnesses, translated the passage as, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was a God." But in the original Greek, there was no indefinite article a. The correct translation was, "And the Word was God," not a God. God. Marcos felt his hands tremble. 43 years of life, 34 of them as a Jehovah's Witness, and he had never questioned this. He grabbed other translations. They all said the same thing, "And the Word was God." That night, Marcos couldn't sleep. Sarah noticed his restlessness, but he didn't know how to explain. How do you tell your wife that you discovered that perhaps, just perhaps, you both have dedicated your entire lives to a lie? The first truth that Jehovah's Witnesses hide is perhaps the most shocking of all. Their own Bible was deliberately altered to support their doctrines. The New World Translation wasn't made by biblical scholars or experts in ancient languages. It was produced by an anonymous committee, of which only one member, Frederick Franz, had some limited knowledge of biblical Greek. Even this knowledge was questioned in court during the famous Walsh case in Scotland in 1954, when Franz publicly admitted he couldn't translate Genesis 2:4 from Hebrew. But the alterations weren't accidental. They were systematic, calculated, strategic. Besides John 1:1, more than 237 passages were modified to remove any evidence of Christ's divinity. Colossians 1:16-17 had the word "other" inserted 4 times, even though it doesn't exist in the original text, to suggest Christ was God's first creation. Hebrews 1:6 was changed so angels would pay homage to Jesus instead of worship him. Dr. Julius Manti, co-author of the Grammar of New Testament Greek, officially declared, "I have never read such a poor translation as the New World Translation. It's shocking, astounding. It's a biased translation. It's not scholarly or reasonable to translate John 1:1 as the Word was a God." Marcos discovered this 3 weeks after that first sleepless night. With each research, each comparison with ancient manuscripts, reality became clearer. He had dedicated his life to defending an adulterated version of God's Word. The second hidden truth is buried in old Watchtower publications the organization prefers you never see. Charles Taze Russell, founder of the movement, predicted Christ would return invisibly in 1874 and Armageddon would come in 1914. When 1914 passed without the world ending, the date was moved to 1918, then 1925, then 1975. Joseph Franklin Rutherford, the second president, was even more specific. In the magazine Millions Now Living Will Never Die, published in 1920, he categorically declared, "Therefore we may confidently expect that 1925 will mark the return of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and the faithful prophets of old to a condition of human perfection." To support this prophecy, the organization went so far as to buy a mansion in San Diego, California, called Beth Sarim, House of Princes, where the resurrected patriarchs were supposed to live. The property was maintained until 1948, 13 years after the prophecy failed, but the most traumatic prediction was 1975. The organization didn't just suggest, it emphatically declared that 6,000 years of humanity would end in 1975, marking the beginning of Christ's millennial kingdom. Watchtower publications between 1966 and 1975 are filled with statements like, according to reliable Bible chronology, 6,000 years since man's creation will end in 1975. And the seventh period of 1,000 years of human history will begin in the fall of 1975. The result? Thousands of Jehovah's Witnesses sold their homes, abandoned careers, cancelled surgeries, avoided having children. When 1975 passed, the organization simply blamed members for reading too much into publications and creating unrealistic expectations. Sarah, Marco's wife, was part of this group. In 1974, at 16, she had dropped out of school because she wouldn't need higher education in the new world that was coming. 30 years later, she still worked as a cleaning lady, sustained by hope that the end was just around the corner. The third hidden truth is written in blood. Literally, the prohibition of blood transfusion, presented as an immutable biblical commandment, is actually a doctrine that evolved gradually and inconsistently. Until 1945, Jehovah's Witnesses could accept blood transfusions without any problem of conscience. The prohibition began in 1945, but initially allowed the use of blood serum and plasma fractions. In 1958, these were also prohibited. In 1961, the use of certain fractions was allowed again. In 1982, albumin was released. In 1995, immunoglobulins were released. In 2000, blood-derived clotting factors were permitted. The inconsistency is glaring. It's allowed to accept albumin, which represents 4% of blood plasma, but it's forbidden to accept the plasma itself. It's allowed to accept blood-derived immunoglobulins, but not the blood from which they were extracted. Dr. Osamu Muramoto, hematologist and former Jehovah's Witness, documented this shocking reality. Between 1961 and 2000, I recorded at least 1,226 documented deaths of Jehovah's Witnesses that could have been prevented with blood transfusion, including 229 children under 18 years old. The most disturbing part is that many of these deaths occurred during periods when the doctrine was in transition. People died refusing treatments that would be considered matters of conscience just a few years later. Marcos remembered Ricardo, a 22-year-old from his congregation who died in 1990 after a car accident. He refused blood transfusion and died leaving a pregnant wife and devastated parents. In 1995, the treatment that could have saved him was released by the organization. The fourth hidden truth happens behind closed doors, in windowless rooms, where men without psychological or legal training decide the fate of entire families. The judicial committee system of Jehovah's Witnesses operates as a secret religious tribunal. 3 elders chosen not for competence or preparation, but for time of service and loyalty to the organization. They have absolute power to excommunicate members for a list of sins that includes everything from adultery to questioning the organization's doctrines. The process is Kafkaesque. The accused has no right to a lawyer, cannot record the session, cannot call defense witnesses if they're not Jehovah's Witnesses in good standing. Accepted evidence includes gossip, assumptions, and even circumstantial evidence, like being seen talking to someone of the opposite sex. But the real weapon of destruction is disfellowshipping, the equivalent of excommunication. Once disfellowshipped, the person becomes literally dead to their Jehovah's Witness family and friends. Parents cannot speak to children. Children cannot visit elderly parents. Spouses are encouraged to divorce. The internal manual, Shepherd the Flock of God, used exclusively by elders, contains detailed instructions on how to psychologically break the accused. One specific section guides, if the wrongdoer seems unrepentant, ask questions that expose the depth of his rebellion. This may include questions about intimate details of his immoral conduct. Lisa, a 19-year-old from Marcos's congregation, was disfellowshipped in 2018 for accepting a blood transfusion after birth complications. Her parents, faithful for 40 years, were forbidden from visiting her in the hospital or meeting their grandson. The baby grew up without grandparents, uncles, or cousins. His entire biological family became strangers by religious decision. The fifth hidden truth lies in the Watchtower's coffers, an organization that preaches voluntary poverty while accumulating billions in assets. Officially, Jehovah's Witnesses don't pass collection plates or charge tithes. The reality is more sophisticated and more profitable. The system works through voluntary contributions that in practice are mandatory for those who want to maintain good standing in the congregation. Every month, each congregation must send a fixed amount to world headquarters, regardless of whether they've raised that amount or not. If they can't, they must take loans or sell properties. Each publication distributed for free has a suggested contribution value. Each pioneer must contribute monthly to support the worldwide work. But the Watchtower's real financial empire is in real estate. Between 2004 and 2016, the organization sold 36 properties in Brooklyn, New York, for over $1.2 billion. These properties had been built with free volunteer labor from Jehovah's Witnesses, who believed they were building for Jehovah. The new world headquarters in Warwick, also built entirely with volunteer labor, was budgeted at $1.7 billion. Meanwhile, local elders hold special collections to pay the Kingdom Hall's electric bills. Raymond Franz, former member of the governing body, revealed in his book, Crisis of Conscience, the main concern of the leaders was not with people, but with the organization as an institution. Decisions affecting millions of lives were made based on organizational and financial considerations, not biblical ones. Marcos discovered this when he was appointed to his congregation's financial committee. The financial reports showed that 78% of local contributions were sent to world headquarters, while the congregation struggled to pay for basic Kingdom Hall repairs. The sixth hidden truth is the most disturbing of all, a system that protects predators and silences victims. The two-witness rule, based on a distorted interpretation of Deuteronomy 19:15, requires crimes like child sexual abuse to be proven by at least 2 eyewitnesses of the act for disciplinary action to be taken. Since abusers rarely commit their crimes in the presence of witnesses, the rule effectively protects perpetrators. In 2018, during the Candace Conti versus Watchtower case in California, court documents revealed that the organization maintained a secret database with more than 23,120 cases of child sexual abuse occurring within congregations in the United States. Cases that were never reported to authorities. The organization's official policy prohibits elders from reporting abuse to police, even when involving children, claiming pastoral privilege, a concept that doesn't apply to religions that don't officially recognize the sacrament of confession. Jerry Armstrong, former elder and abuse survivor, testified, "I was abused at 8 by a ministerial servant. When I reported to the elders at 15, they told me to forgive and forget, that Jehovah would handle the situation." The abuser continued serving in the congregation for 20 more years, having access to dozens of other children. The internal protocol determines that abuse victims cannot speak about the matter with other congregation members under penalty of being disfellowshipped for slander. Many victims are forced to confront their abusers face-to-face during judicial committee hearings, reliving traumas in the name of biblical justice. Barbara Anderson, former employee of the Watchtower's service department for over 10 years, was disfellowshipped in 2002 for trying to expose these cases. She revealed, "During my time at World Headquarters, I received hundreds of letters from elders reporting cases of child sexual abuse. The standard guidance was always the same: don't report to authorities, maintain secrecy, let Jehovah resolve it." The seventh and final hidden truth crumbles the very doctrinal foundation of Jehovah's Witnesses: the existence of a special class of 144,000 anointed who rule over a great crowd of earthly faithful. According to official doctrine, only 144,000 people in all of human history have heavenly hope, beginning with the apostles and extending to our days. This special class forms the faithful and discreet slave that God uses to guide the organization. The mathematical problem is glaring. If only 144,000 true Christians existed from Pentecost until today, that means an average of only 72 true Christians per year during the last 2,000 years. Considering there are today approximately 22,000 Jehovah's Witnesses who claim to be anointed and partake of the emblems at the annual memorial, the doctrine becomes numerically impossible. But the most devastating evidence is in the Watchtower's own publications. In 1935, at the Washington Convention, Judge Rutherford declared that the number of 144,000 was complete, and new converts would be part of the earthly great crowd. However, the Yearbook of Jehovah's Witnesses shows that between 1935 and 2020, more than 63,000 people partook of the emblems at the memorial, a number that should be biologically impossible if the 144,000 group was already complete in 1935. The official explanation changed several times. First, they said some of the original 144,000 proved unfaithful, being replaced. Then they claimed not everyone who partook of the emblems was truly anointed. Recently, the New Light TM revealed that the closing of the 144,000 didn't happen in 1935, but would happen shortly before Armageddon. Charles Taze Russell originally taught that all Jehovah's Witnesses had heavenly hope. The division into two classes was a later invention to solve the problem of the organization's numerical growth beyond 144,000. Marcos finally understood. The entire authoritarian structure of the Watchtower was based on a forced literal interpretation of a symbolic number from Revelation. Marcos spent 6 months researching in silence. Each discovery was like a punch to the stomach. Each revelation deconstructed a piece of the reality he had known for decades. On the morning of March 15th, he wrote an 8-page letter to his wife, Sarah. In it, he exposed everything: the manipulated translations, the false prophecies, the preventable deaths, family destruction, financial manipulation, abuse cover-ups, the false doctrine of the anointed. Sarah read the letter 3 times. She cried for hours, not from anger, but from recognition. Every word from Marcos echoed doubts she had buried in her heart for years. 2 days later, Marcos resigned from his elder position. A week later, they stopped attending meetings. A month later, they were officially disfellowshipped for apostasy. Today, 3 years later, Marcos works as a freelance translator. Sarah went back to school and graduated in education at 48. Their children, initially revolted, gradually understood their parents' decision as they discovered the same truths. They lost all the friends they'd had for decades. Sarah's parents no longer speak to her. Marcos's brother treats him as dead. But for the first time in decades, they sleep in peace. The most disturbing truth about Jehovah's Witnesses isn't what they hide from the Bible, it's what they hide from themselves, that they dedicated their lives to defending an organization that puts its own survival above the welfare of its members. If this account touched something deep in you, it's because your conscience recognizes truth when it hears it. If you're a Jehovah's Witness and feel a chill right now, don't ignore that feeling. It's your soul asking to be free. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story, share it. Because truth, however painful, always liberates. The question remains, do you have the courage to investigate for yourself? Or will you continue letting others think for you? If this video changed something in you, leave a comment telling your story and subscribe to the channel. But only if you're prepared to discover truths that can change your life forever. And you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. John 8:32.